The headache pounded against Vanessa's skull like a rhythmic drum. She blinked, her long, thick lashes fluttering against skin that felt too warm. This wasn't her high-thread count silk bedding. This was charcoal linen, smelling of expensive sandalwood and something metallic. Vanessa bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her dark skin glowed against the dark sheets, a stark, beautiful contrast she was too panicked to notice. She was naked. The memory of the clubhouse, the baths, the shots of tequila, the laughter of her friends celebrating her senior VP promotion was a blurred mosaic. She looked to her side. The bed was empty, but the indentation in the pillow remained. Panic, sharp and cold, replaced the hangover. She scrambled out of bed, her long legs shaking as she gathered her designer dress from the floor. She didn't look for her heels. She grabbed them and ran. At the heavy mahogany doors of the penthouse, two men stood like stone statues. They were Asian, dressed in sharp black suits, their faces devoid of emotion. "I'm leaving," she snapped, her voice trembling despite her attempt at professional authority. They didn't move to stop her. One simply tapped an earpiece. "The bird is flying," he muttered in Korean. The doors buzzed open. Vanessa didn't wait for an elevator. She hit the stairs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She burst onto the street, flagged an Uber with a frantic thumb, and didn't breathe until the car pulled away. She never looked back at the glass tower. She didn't want to know his name. She just wanted her life back. 2 days had passed. Vanessa had buried herself in work, convincing her mind that the night was a lapse in judgment, a one-time blackout. She sat in her corner office, her brilliant mind navigating complex algorithms when her phone buzzed. "Private number. You forgot your earrings, Vanessa. They look better on the nightstand than in your ears." She dropped her phone. Her hands flew to her earlobes, empty. She had been wearing her mother's diamond studs that night. That evening the paranoia took root. As she drove home, a matte black sedan stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind her. Every turn she took, it followed. When she sped up, it matched her. When she pulled into her gated apartment complex, the car sat idling at the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights like the eyes of a predator. Vanessa locked her door, engaged the deadbolt, and leaned against the wood, gasping. She was safe. She was a tech genius. She had a smart security system. She checked her phone, no alerts. She walked into her kitchen to pour a glass of wine, but stopped dead. On the marble island sat a steaming plate of kimchi bokkeumbap and a single black dahlia in a crystal vase. The steam rose in a lazy curl, meaning whoever had made it had been there seconds ago. There was no sign of a break-in, no broken window, just the smell of toasted sesame oil and the chilling realization that her sanctuary had been breached. She didn't eat the food. She threw it in the trash, her heart racing so fast she feared a stroke. She spent the night on the sofa with a kitchen knife in her hand, staring at the front door. The next morning she woke to the sound of her own alarm. She had drifted off at dawn. Shaking, she went to her bedroom to change for work, desperate for the routine of the office to save her. She stripped off her clothes and stepped into the shower, the hot water scalding her skin. But as she reached for her towel, she froze. Her bathroom mirror, usually fogged over, had been wiped clear in a perfect circle. Written in the condensation were 4 words. "You smell like me." She scrambled out of the bathroom, wrapping herself in a robe. She checked the bed. Spread across her duvet were dozens of black dahlias. The room felt heavy, the air thick with the same sandalwood scent from the penthouse. "Who are you?" she screamed into the empty apartment. "What do you want?" The only answer was the chime of her work email, a notification for a mandatory board meeting. A new majority shareholder had just been announced for her company. She looked at the name on the digital memo, HG Holdings. Vanessa dressed in her most imposing power suit, emerald green that complemented her deep complexion and commanded respect. She needed to feel like the senior VP, not a hunted woman. When she walked into the boardroom, the air changed. The other executives were whispering, their faces pale. At the head of the table, in the chair usually reserved for the CEO, sat a man. He was breathtakingly handsome, with sharp, feline features and hair as black as ink. His suit was bespoke, silk-lined and worth more than her car. His hands were folded on the table, revealing a glimpse of a tattoo peeking from under his cuff, the tail of a dragon. This was the man from the bed. This was Hangul. He didn't look at the CEO. He didn't look at the charts. His dark, slanted eyes were locked on Vanessa from the moment she crossed the threshold. "You're late, Miss Clarke," he said. His voice was a deep, melodic baritone that sent a traitorous shiver down her spine. "I had a domestic disturbance," she replied, her voice icy. Hangul smirked, a slow, predatory tilt of his lips. "I heard. I hope the flowers reached you in good health. I find the black dahlia suits your resilient nature." The room went silent. The other board members looked between them, sensing a lethal tension they couldn't name. Vanessa realized then that he wasn't hiding. He was claiming her in front of everyone she worked with. The meeting was a blur of hostile takeovers and restructured assets. Hangul spoke with a terrifying authority, dismantling departments with a flick of his pen. After the room cleared, Vanessa stayed behind. She waited until the door clicked shut. "Stay away from my house," she hissed, slamming her hands on the table. "I don't care how much money you have. If you enter my home again, I'm calling the police." Hangul rose slowly. He was taller than he looked while sitting, a wall of lean, powerful muscle. He walked around the table, his movements graceful and silent. He stopped inches from her, his heat radiating through her suit. "The police work for me, Vanessa," he whispered, leaning down so his lips brushed the shell of her ear. "The guards at my door work for me, and soon every line of code you write will work for me." He reached out, his long fingers tracing the line of her jaw. Vanessa tried to pull away, but his grip was firm, tilting her face up to his. "You ran away without saying goodbye," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her full lips. "I don't like losing my things, and make no mistake, since the moment you woke up in my bed, you became my most prized acquisition." He pressed her back against the boardroom table, his body pinning hers. The friction was electric, a dark, dangerous spark that ignited the memory of the night she tried to forget. "I'm not a thing," she gasped, her breath hitching. "We'll see," Hangul replied, his hand sliding down to her waist, pulling her flush against his hardness. "Tonight I won't send flowers. I'll come to collect the debt personally." The rest of the day was a fever dream of productivity fueled by pure adrenaline. Vanessa stayed in her office long after the cleaning crews arrived, her fingers flying across the keyboard as if the code could build a wall between her and Hangul. But every time the shadows shifted in the hallway, her heart skipped. When she finally gathered her things to leave, the office was a tomb of glass and steel. She reached the parking garage, her heels echoing like gunshots against the concrete. There, leaning against her car, was a man in a black suit, not Hangul, but one of the guards from the penthouse. "Mr. Hangul is waiting for you at home, Miss Clarke," the man said, opening the door of a waiting black SUV. "I have my own car," Vanessa replied, her voice trembling. "It's already been moved to your apartment," the guard said, his face a mask of indifference. "Please, don't make this difficult." She looked around the deserted garage. There was no one to scream to, no one to witness the silent abduction. She realized with a sinking feeling that Hangul's collection had already begun. She stepped into the back of the SUV, the scent of sandalwood clinging to the leather seats, wrapping around her like a silken noose. When Vanessa entered her apartment, the lights were dimmed to a soft, amber glow. The air was thick with the smell of seared steak and expensive red wine. Hangul was in her kitchen. He had removed his suit jacket, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms covered in intricate, dark ink, dragons and lotus flowers entwined in a dance of violence and beauty. He was expertly slicing meat with one of her own kitchen knives, his movements practiced and lethal. "You're late again," he said without looking up. "I don't like my food getting cold." "Get out," Vanessa whispered, though the command lacked conviction. The sight of him occupying her domestic space was more intimate than the bed they had shared. "Sit," he commanded. It wasn't a request. The sheer weight of his presence forced her into the chair. He placed a plate in front of her, perfectly prepared Hangul beef. He poured a glass of deep crimson wine and sat across from her, watching her with an intensity that made her skin itch. "Why me?" she asked, staring at the wine. "You're a billionaire, a king. You could have anyone." "I don't want anyone," Hangul said, reaching across the table to tuck a stray lock of her hair behind her ear. His touch was scorching. "I want the woman who looked at me in that club and didn't blink. The woman who manages the data of the very city I rule. You are the only thing in this world I don't already fully control, Vanessa. I find that intolerable." Vanessa took a defiant sip of the wine, the alcohol burning a trail down her throat. "You think you can just buy me? Buy my company and I'll fall into line." Hangul chuckled, a low vibration that seemed to hum in the floorboards. "I don't buy what I can simply take. I bought your company to keep you close. I'm in your home to keep you safe." "Safe from who? You're the only one stalking me." Hangul's expression shifted, the playful predator replaced by something colder. He stood up and walked around the table, standing behind her. He leaned down, his chest pressing against her back, his hands sliding over her shoulders and down to her breasts. "You think your promotion was just merit," he whispered, his breath hot against her neck. "The previous VP was selling your tech to the triads. I handled him. If I hadn't stepped in that night at the clubhouse, you wouldn't have woken up in a silk bed. You would have woken up in a shipping container." His hands tightened, his thumbs brushing against her nipples through the thin silk of her blouse. Vanessa gasped, her body betraying her. The fear was there, but so was a dark, pulsing heat that made her ache. "You're mine, Vanessa," he groaned, his face burying in the crook of her neck. "I saved you. Now you pay the interest." He didn't take her to the bedroom. He wanted her right there, amidst the remnants of the life she thought she owned. Hangul spun her chair around, forcing her legs apart as he knelt between them. "Look at me," he commanded. Vanessa looked down into those dark, bottomless eyes. She saw a man who had killed, a man who had built empires on bones, and a man who was utterly consumed by the sight of her. He unzipped her skirt with a slow, agonizing deliberateness. When he saw the black lace she wore underneath, his jaw tightened. "Beautiful," he rasped. His hands, calloused and strong, roamed over her thighs, his touch a mixture of worship and ownership. He didn't rush. He wanted her to feel every inch of his dominance. When his mouth finally met her skin, Vanessa let out a broken cry. He was a master of her body's geography, finding every sensitive nerve with the precision of a surgeon. He teased her until she was sobbing his name, her fingers digging into his hair, pulling him closer even as she hated herself for wanting him. "Say it," he whispered against her inner thigh. "Tell me who you belong to." "You," she breathed, the word a surrender that tasted like ash and honey. "I belong to you, Hangul." The night was a blur of high-stakes passion and possessive demands. Hangul was relentless, marking her skin with bruises that looked like petals, vibrant purple against her deep bronze. In the early hours of the morning, as Vanessa lay tangled in his arms on her own sofa, she felt the cold metal of something being pressed against her wrist. She looked down. It was a heavy gold bracelet locked tight. There was no clasp, no keyhole. "What is this?" she asked, her voice raw. "A GPS tracker," Hangul said simply, kissing the top of her head. "And a warning to anyone who looks at you. It bears the seal of my family. In my world, this is a wedding ring." "I didn't agree to this," she said, though she didn't try to pull away. "You agreed the moment you stayed for dinner," Hangul replied. He stood up, naked and unabashed, his body a map of scars and stories. He dressed with the same efficiency he used in the boardroom. "A car will be here at 8 to take you to work. Don't bother trying to remove the gold. It's tempered steel inside. Only I have the tool to take it off." He walked to the door, stopping only to look back at her one last time. "Work hard today, Vanessa. I'll be watching your metrics, and remember, I'm always listening." The door clicked shut, and for the first time in her life, the brilliant Vanessa Clarke felt like a bird in a gilded cage. And the terrifying part was, she wasn't sure if she wanted the door to open. The weight of the bracelet was a constant, cooling pressure against Vanessa's wrist. At the office, she kept her blazer sleeves pulled down low, but she could feel the phantom heat of Hangul's touch beneath the fabric. Every time she moved her mouse, the gold caught the light, a glittering reminder of her status as an acquisition. Her computer screen flickered. A new file appeared on her desktop, bypassed all firewalls, and opened itself. It was a live feed of her own living room. The apartment was empty, but she saw a team of men in black suits moving through it. They weren't stealing, they were upgrading. They installed reinforced locks, tinted the windows with bulletproof film, and replaced her vanity mirror with a smart glass interface. A text popped up on the screen. "Your sanctuary was too weak. I've strengthened it. Focus on the algorithm, Vanessa. Leave the security to me." She typed back, her fingers trembling. "You're turning my home into a prison." The reply was instantaneous. "A cage only feels like a prison if you try to leave. To me, it's a nest." That evening, Vanessa was expected at a gala for the city's tech elite. She tried to decline, but a garment bag arrived at her office at 4:00 p.m. with a note. "Be ready by 7. The car is already downstairs." Inside was a gown of liquid gold silk, backless and daring, designed to cling to every curve she possessed. When she stepped into the ballroom of the Grand Hyatt, the room went silent. She was tall, radiant, and imposing, but the mark on her wrist drew the eyes of those who knew the underworld. The golden handcuff wasn't just jewelry, it was the crest of the Baeongi Syndicate. Hangul appeared from the shadows of the VIP lounge. He didn't wear a tuxedo. He wore a black silk shirt unbuttoned at the throat, his dragon tattoo trailing up his neck like a warning. He didn't greet her with words. He walked to her, placed a heavy hand on the small of her back, and pulled her flush against him. "You look like a goddess carved from mahogany and sun," he rasped into her ear. "People are starring," she whispered, her heart racing. "Let them," Hangul said, his gaze sweeping the room with lethal intent. "I want them to see the price of looking too long at what is mine." The evening took a dark turn when a rival businessman, a man known for his ties to the Japanese Yakuza, approached them. He didn't look at Hangul, he looked at Vanessa, his eyes traveling over her body with a disgusting hunger. "So this is the prize the Lightning King is hiding," the man sneered. "She's a beautiful piece of hardware. Does she run as well as your software, Hangul?" Vanessa felt the air turn frigid. Hangul's hand on her back didn't tremble, but his grip tightened until it was almost painful. He stepped in front of her, shielding her entirely. "Her name is Vanessa," Hangul said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, quiet register. "And if you speak of her again, I will ensure you never speak at all." The man laughed, but it was hollow. "You're getting soft, Hangul. Obsession is a weakness. It makes you predictable." Hangul didn't respond with words. In a movement too fast for the human eye to follow, he grabbed the man's hand and slammed it onto a nearby cocktail table. A steak knife, plucked from a passing server's tray, was driven through the man's palm, pinning him to the wood. The ballroom erupted in screams. Hangul didn't flinch. He turned back to Vanessa, his face calm. "The party is over. We're going home." The ride back was silent and thick with tension. Vanessa was shaking, not just from the violence she had witnessed, but from the raw, territorial power Hangul had displayed. He hadn't just protected her, he had claimed her in blood. As soon as they entered his penthouse, the same one she had escaped from nights ago. He turned her around and pressed her against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights sparkled 60 floors below, but all she could see were his dark, burning eyes. "Does it scare you?" he asked, his hands fisting in her gold hair. "Seeing what I do for you?" "It scares me that you think you have the right," she gasped, even as her body arched toward him. "I have every right," he growled. He ripped the gold silk of her dress, the fabric giving way with a violent protest. "I told you, Vanessa, you are the only thing I care about in this rotting city. I will burn it to the ground to keep you." He took her right there against the glass, with a ferocity that was more combat than lovemaking. It was explicit, primal, and deeply possessive. He marked her with his teeth, his hands, and his name, ensuring that when she looked in the mirror, she would see only him. Hours later, Vanessa lay in the massive bed, her body aching and her mind reeling. Hangul was asleep beside her, his tattooed arm thrown over her waist, pinning her to him even in slumber. She reached for his phone on the nightstand, a foolish move, but her curiosity was afire. It was unlocked. She opened the gallery and felt her blood turn to ice. There were hundreds of photos of her, not just from the last few days, but from months ago. Photos of her at the gym, at her favorite coffee shop, standing on her balcony. He hadn't just met her at the clubhouse. He had been hunting her for a year. She looked at the most recent photo, taken only an hour ago while she was asleep in his arms. The caption beneath it, written in Korean, translated via her tech-savvy brain to, "My heart, my prey, my queen." She realized then that the promotion hadn't been the start. It was the trap closing. She turned to look at the man beside her, her lover, her captor, her boss, and realized the dark romance she was in wasn't a phase. It was her new life. The revelation on the phone stayed locked in Vanessa's mind like a virus. She watched Hangul sleep, his breathing deep and even, looking almost peaceful for a man who had spent months cataloging her life. She realized that every chance encounter she'd had over the last year, the spilled coffee at the bistro, the random tech conference where she was the keynote speaker, had been a scene in his play. She moved to slide out of the bed, but his arm tightened instantly. He didn't even open his eyes. "Don't," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "The floor is cold, stay in the heat." "You've been following me for a year, Hangul," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I saw the photos." He opened his eyes then. There was no guilt in them, only a terrifyingly calm clarity. He propped himself up on one elbow, the dragon on his chest appearing to writhe in the dim light. "I wasn't following you, Vanessa. I was protecting my investment. You were working for a company that didn't deserve your mind. I was waiting for the right moment to bring you into my world. The clubhouse was just the finish line." He leaned in, kissing the bridge of her nose. "Now that you know, there's no reason to keep up the pretense. You don't go back to your apartment. Your things have already been moved here." Vanessa was now a prisoner of the highest order. Hangul didn't stop her from working. In fact, he encouraged it. He had a secondary office built for her within his penthouse, a glass-walled sanctuary equipped with the most advanced servers in the world. But there was a catch. Every line of code she wrote was mirrored on his private tablet. He watched her work like a connoisseur watching a master painter. He would sit on the leather sofa behind her desk, sipping whiskey, his eyes tracking the movement of her fingers on the keys. "You're distracted," he noted one afternoon, standing up and walking toward her. "It's hard to focus with a predator in the room," she snapped, staring at the screen. Hangul slid his hands under her arms, lifting her from the chair as if she weighed nothing. He sat in her chair and pulled her onto his lap, facing him. "Then let's find a different focus," he whispered. He began to unbutton her blouse, his eyes dark with a sudden, sharp hunger. "I find that when you're occupied, your mind stops fighting me and starts belonging to me." He made love to her right there, among the humming servers and flickering monitors, a raw and explicit reminder that even her brilliant mind was under his jurisdiction. A week into her new life, the sirens of the penthouse security system blared. Vanessa, who had been analyzing the Syndicate's financial encryption, saw the alerts on her screen first. Someone was trying to bypass the elevator locks. A rival faction, sensing Hangul's distraction with his queen, had decided to strike at the heart of his power. Hangul entered the room, a sleek black submachine gun in his hand. He looked different. The lover was gone, replaced by the K-Campy boss. Into the panic room, Vanessa, now. I can help, she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. They're using a brute force script on your gate. If I redirect the IP, I can lock them in the elevator between floors. Hangul paused, a predatory smirk touching his lips. He walked over and kissed her hard, a taste of metal and adrenaline. My brilliant girl, do it. She worked with a cold, surgical precision. Within seconds, the elevator stopped. On the security feed, she watched 4 armed men realize they were trapped. Hangul signaled his guards via his earpiece. Floors 40 and 41, clean them up. The violence was swift and silent. When the air cleared, Hangul returned to the office. He was covered in a light spray of blood across his white shirt, looking like a dark angel of death. He walked to Vanessa, who was staring at the monitors in a daze. She had just helped a mafia boss neutralize his enemies. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. You saved us, Hangul said, kneeling before her. He took her trembling hands in his. You see, we are a matched set, your mind, my strength. You weren't meant for a cubicle, Vanessa. You were meant for a throne. He reached for the gold bracelet on her wrist, pressing a hidden mechanism. It popped open. For a moment, Vanessa felt a surge of hope. Was he letting her go? Instead, he replaced it with a much heavier cuff, encrusted with black diamonds. The gold was for AVP. The black is for the woman who sits at my right hand. He pulled her to her feet and led her toward the bedroom. The adrenaline from the attack turned into a dark, frantic lust. He stripped her with a desperate hunger, his touch more aggressive than ever before. He needed to feel her alive, and he needed her to feel him as her absolute savior. As the sun began to rise over the skyline, Vanessa lay draped across Hangul's chest. The marks on her skin were a map of the night's intensity. She looked at the black diamond cuff, and then at the man holding her as if she were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. She realized she could have let those men up. She could have let them kill him and found a way to escape in the chaos. But she hadn't. I'm not going back, am I? She asked quietly. Hangul stroked her hair, his fingers lingering on the curve of her neck. There is no back, Vanessa. There is only forward with me. He turned her over, pinning her beneath him once more, his eyes reflecting a terrifying devotion. You're not just my obsession anymore. You're my partner in crime, and I will never, ever let you go. Vanessa closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. The brilliant tech executive was gone. In her place was a woman who had found a love so dark and possessive that it had become her entire world. She didn't just accept the cage. She had started to help him build the walls. The shift in Vanessa's status was immediate. She was no longer a secret kept in a penthouse. She was the first lady of the Baeongi Syndicate. Hangul began bringing her to high-stakes meetings in the belly of the city, dimly lit VIP rooms where tobacco smoke curled like ghosts. Vanessa sat by his side, her tall, elegant frame draped in black velvet. She had her laptop open, her eyes scanning the digital ledgers of Hangul's rivals. They're skimming from the Busan port shipments, she whispered to him during a tense negotiation with a sub-boss. Hangul didn't even look at the man across the table. He simply squeezed Vanessa's thigh under the table, his thumb tracing the hem of her skirt. My queen says you are a thief, Hangul said, his voice like sliding gravel, and she is never wrong. The sub-boss turned pale. He looked at Vanessa, seeing not just a beautiful woman but the brain powering the most dangerous man in the country. The power was intoxicating. Vanessa felt a dark thrill as the man was dragged out by the guards. She was no longer the prey, she was the predator's partner. Despite her new power, the dark alpha nature of Hangul never simmered down. If anything, his obsession grew. He began to grow jealous of her screen time. One night, as she worked late on an encryption code to protect their assets, Hangul walked in and simply closed her laptop, his eyes flashing with a possessive fire. "I am the only thing you should be studying tonight," he growled. "Hangul, this is important for the Syndicate." "I am the Syndicate," he countered, lifting her onto the desk, scattering her notes and hardware. He took her with a desperate, crushing intensity, his hands bruising her hips as he reminded her that while she ruled the digital world, he ruled her body. The lovemaking was explicit and fierce, a physical manifestation of his need to consume every part of her. He wanted her to forget the code, forget the world, and only know the feel of him inside her. The peace was shattered when Vanessa discovered a hidden backdoor in the company's new server, one she hadn't built. Someone was leaking their location to an international task force. She tracked the signal. It wasn't a rival gang. It was one of Hangul's oldest advisors, a man who thought Hangul had grown distracted by his obsession with Vanessa. "They think you're weak because of me," Vanessa said, showing Hangul the data. Hangul's face became a mask of cold fury. "They think I am distracted. I will show them that my obsession only makes me more lethal." He didn't send his guards. He took Vanessa with him to the advisor's estate. He wanted her to witness the end of the man who tried to take her safety away. He made her stand by his side as he systematically dismantled the man's empire in a single night of tactical brilliance and brutal violence. Back at the penthouse, the adrenaline of the betrayal hadn't faded. Hangul was covered in the dust of the conflict, his eyes wild. He grabbed Vanessa, pulling her into a kiss that tasted of salt and iron. "You're the only one I trust," he gasped against her lips. "The only one." He led her to the bathroom, where he stripped her and himself, stepping into the oversized rainfall shower. As the water washed away the night's grime, he held her as if she were a lifeline. "I won't let anyone take you. Not the law, not my enemies, not even your own fear." He moved her against the marble wall, the steam rising around them. This time the passion was different. It wasn't just dominance, it was a soul-deep anchoring. He moved with a slow, agonizing rhythm, his eyes locked on hers, demanding that she see the man behind the monster. In that moment, Vanessa realized she didn't want to be saved. She wanted to be his. A month later, the world had adjusted to the new power dynamic. The tech company Vanessa once worked for was now the premier surveillance firm for the Syndicate. Vanessa stood on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out over the city. She wore the black diamond cuff and a matching ring. She was the most powerful woman in the underworld, her brilliance now weaponized for the man she loved. Hangul stepped out behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his broad chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his dragon tattoo peeking out from his collar. "Are you happy, my queen?" he asked, his voice a low purr. Vanessa looked at her reflection in the glass, beautiful, tall, and formidable. She thought about the woman who had run out of the clubhouse in terror, and she didn't recognize her anymore. "I'm exactly where I was always meant to be," she replied, turning in his arms to kiss him. The Alpha had claimed his prize, but the prize had discovered her own darkness. Together, they didn't just rule the city, they owned it. The obsession was no longer a haunting, it was a home.